one set of lawyers that I work with pretty often is they like to do, they do a focus group every couple of months, and they'll set up a 3-hour block with me. And then what we do is we get together and we decide, okay, anything going to trial right away? If it is, let's allocate, a good chunk of time, maybe an hour and a half. And then, okay, what's left? Okay, let's fit in 3 cases here. Now, you've just split that cost, right? But depending on where each case is, right? Sometimes maybe you got one that's just came in the door, right? Okay, great. That we can do that in 30 minutes. Maybe you got one that's gone through discovery, and so we kind of have the ability to be flexible with our time and what we're going to do. And what they like to do as well is they do a series. So they just finished up a case. It's been probably 3 or 4 months, but it went to trial. But when they came in the door to me, I was like, ooh, this is a real big disputed liability. I mean, it's an underwrite case. But their client had TBI, so didn't remember, right? So we only had one version of events. Well, and when they got the case, solid group of lawyers, they did a ton of investigation. So when they came to me, they had a ton of information. I'm like, okay, well, here's their problem. And this, all they wanted to make sure is, how do we flip disputed liability? So we started out, we ended up doing 4 focus groups over a period of almost 18 months. Right. So they kept bringing it back to me. Let's do it again. And they just kept moving that needle on disputed liability. It was 80%, and we got it down all the way to 50% before trial. And then at trial, they were able to get it down to 20%. And so like they used, an hour, 2 hours. Then they finally did a 3-hour one. Like and the last one they did, they had, of course, right up at trial, right? Defense produces that surveillance video of their client, picking up a box or moving something, so they're like, okay, we got to test the client. So, right. So we do all the opening stuff, and then we focus in on doing, them created a client video for like the client answering very open-ended questions for about 7 minutes, did credibility there. And then we compared that with this surveillance video, because they wanted to know, how do we get around this surveillance video? Is it as bad as we think it is, or is it not bad at all? So they basically built over and over again. And then when they came to trial, then what I built for them was a chart of like, okay, here's all the focus groups we did. Here are the styles, here are the outcomes, and here are some of we kind of do a grouping of, okay, here were the rat jurors for you. Like, here were the people who just, no matter what we said, no matter what we did, like, no. So
rat poison. Yep.
that's right. So if you had, it's not going to be an accurate 100%. This person shows up on your panel, they got to kick them out. But what you would like to have is just a little bit of like, oh, okay, let me keep that in my mind. Let me talk to that person. Maybe their experiences are different. But they had so much information for their case along the way versus waiting till that last.
Oh yeah. I mean, can you imagine being pre-trial 60 days out and find out that 80% liability against you? Holy gee. I mean, you're like, what the hell? I mean, that's when you start calling to the side going, there's still an offer on the table? I mean, versus, I mean, I'm sure that probably went from, well, I mean, look, we're not talking to a non-lawyer audience. I mean, everybody here, anybody that would watch the video would understand the significance of going from 80% against you to 20% against you. That's, and in a state with comparative negligence, that's the difference between a verdict and a recovery and not. And then, now you go down to the type of thing that you see sometimes. That 20% is the number you see sometimes when your client got rear-ended. And they didn't do anything, just sit at a stoplight, get rear-ended. 20% your fault, you were on the road. I mean, whatever. So that's a tremendous effort, and another example of a great way to use the resource over time. And that's some very artful lawyering to take that and learn those lessons and build that up over time. And then, like you said, then to have developed some pretty good profiles about, I use the term rat poison, but the types of people that are going to submarine you, you're just going to torpedo your case no matter what you say. And it's like you say, it's not really a guarantee that that's going to be every time. But what you and I know about this from our years of doing is you get archetypes, right? you get a picture of the kind of person who's likely to sink you. And I always go back to one of the first cases I tried and lost. I made the choice to leave a physical therapist, female physical therapist, on a case where there were two female drivers. My client got rear-ended and she had whiplash injuries, and the other lady I had deposed, and she had never said anything about any types of sudden emergencies. And we got to the trial and she said she had a sneezing attack. And that was why she had hit my lady and couldn't stop. Not that she was playing with her phone or whatever. Of course, this was 25 years ago. There really weren't too many people playing with cell phones then, but that was her excuse. I mean, and so anyway, she, and that physical therapist, who I made a clear distinction between leaving this female physical therapist on the panel versus a man with my client was a young, attractive, married military spouse. And I look back at now, I'm like, you are so stupid. How do you leave a woman on a panel over a man when you have a female plaintiff? Because men, our poor biases, we tend to be sympathetic to women anyway, right? And so I should have just gone with that, but I went with, oh, she's a physical therapist. She's seen people have long-term pain. She knows, what it's like and how it can be chronic. And I had all these rationales that were so good. And then, the jury panel goes back and I talked to a juror afterwards, and it was like the initial vote was 11-1 in my favor. And that lady literally just slammed her hand on the table and said, I will never give this bitch $1. She is not hurt. The other lady didn't do anything wrong. I'll stay here all day. And that went back and forth for 3 hours. And eventually everybody just gave up and said, we're never going to change her mind. And they, voted for the defendant because of her. Mm-hmm. And archetypes, getting that information over a period of time gives you great idea of what your worst archetypes are for your particular case. Mm-hmm. And if I had done that in my case, I might not have had life lessons.
Well, I mean, I think you don't want to start at ground zero. Like you really want to be able to walk in. And the other thing too, I will tell you, just thinking about jury selection, is you hear it, you hear, and that just hearing people over again talk about it, what their reactions are, that really helps you when you're standing in front of somebody and they tell you something that's a little shocking. You're not shocked. You've already expected this. Now you know how to talk back with that person in a way that's helpful for your case, versus you're just now getting up and hearing all these reactions. You're not sure where to go. So that's another thing I think is so helpful. Even with you're doing these short 1 hour, you're going to hear the way people talk about it, and you're not going to have that shock or surprise. And also you're going to be able to develop, okay, you said this, let me zoom over here, or how do I gracefully, either get other people to go along with that. So it really helps you tune your ear to how to do jury selection and what people are going to say, versus
right.
If you start at ground zero, you may not know how then to transition, move that person, get them to talk more if you need that, whatever it may be. It helps at least not start from ground zero.
Right. I think that's a wonderful point. And the archetype sort of issue kicks in again, in the sense that, at actual voir dire, if you recognize that bad archetype, that might be the time that you want that person. You want to draw in everyone you can who thinks like that, and get all those people sort of committed to that idea, especially if there's a bias there that can get you people gone for cause and save your strikes. Then, like you said, there's just so much benefit to having that type of preparation, so you're not flat-footed. And we have a lot of federal court practitioners in consumer law, and I've tried a lot of federal cases, and voir dire in federal court is so much more scripted and controlled. But the best judges do give you the opportunity to follow up. And so the way you address these issues in that scenario is you get your seed questions into the voir dire questions that the judge is going to ask, in addition to their normal, right? Because they'll give you a few, right? Some judges will say, I'll give you 5, give you 10, or I'll give you whatever y'all agree on. And you want to get those C questions that, that start the conversations and trigger those archetypes that you've learned through that process, right? And then that gives you those moments that you can stand up and follow up on those, and you're not completely separated from the opportunity to find those archetypes and identify them and get them to talk, even if it's only just to confirm to, even if you end up having to use a peremptory because you don't get to really pull them in fully, you still will at least have had the opportunity to identify them. And that's the benefit of this process, that knowledge over time and seeing the same triggers create, hit the same, same archetypes, as we're talking about, that's just invaluable because, when you see it multiple times over the life of a case and you know that this archetype is always going to be negative, then you can always be thinking about and preparing for how to find those people for the one that they score, right?
Mm-hmm.
Versus the practice rounds. I mean, the one that actually determines what happens. So it's I think that's another tremendous reason to make that investment and to use the resource, because like you said, it is far, far different when you're standing up there flat footed and cold. And I've been, I was by myself for 25 years. So there are plenty of trials I walked into, especially as a young lawyer, I had no damn clue what I was about to hear. And it was just like, it's completely flat footed. You just hope you don't F it up and do the best you can. And sometimes it works out and sometimes not so much. But nothing can benefit you more than having had those conversations with multiple groups and running out those trails and figuring out where they take you, right?
Yeah.